Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special edition of Jordan and Drew, the Sports Crew, the EWC Boys midseason recap. We'll call it a midseason recap. We're a little over a third of the year, I believe, through, but we got a lot of good stuff to talk about. And of course, we have on Mr. EWC himself, Robert Shimek. Robert, how you doing today?
I'm just ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, this is going to be a long one, I think, but we got a lot of good stuff. This is going to be great. We got to talk we're just going to cover boys in this episode because we got a lot to talk about. So let's get right into it. Sheboygan Falls sitting at the bottom, 0-5, 1-7 overall. I mean, not really a lot of things we can say about the Sheboygan Falls team. It's been a tough year so far. Just looking through the points per game, you got Ethan Verhulst at 9.1, and then him, and then also averaging 6 boards. But other than that, I mean, not much from this Falls team.
Yeah, I mean, Falls was a team earlier in the year. My expectations, weren't the highest, but I did think they were a capable team. I mean, you saw them go beat Southern Door on the road, and Southern Door's not a great team, but they're definitely a capable team. They have some nice players. They're athletic. And after that game, say, okay, Sheboygan Falls I thought was a little ahead of New Holstein and Two Rivers, but I kind of still think Sheboygan Falls will beat Two Rivers twice, and I think they will beat New Holstein again because I think they're just a little better. I don't know. Yeah, just a tough start, 0-5, but I definitely think they'll rebound. I don't think they'll finish last.
Yeah, and I think the team that will finish last, I'm sorry, Two Rivers, don't want to do it to you, but sitting at 1-4, they came off a big win or surprising win, I'll say, over New Holstein. They won by 13, and I would have not expected that at the start of the year. If you told me TR was going to go to New Holstein on the road and beat the New Holstein Huskies by double digits, I was shocked to see that. But yeah, this Raiders team, other than that game, have not done well this year. Just looking through the schedule, I mean, they've had some tough games. Let's load here. Yeah, like playing, they lost by 32 at Valor's. They lost by 30 to Brilliant, and then they lost by a whopping 58 to Roncalli. So it has not been great so far for the Two Rivers Raiders, but there are some speculations. I know even on our podcast here at the Sports Crew, like of them even winning a game. So them winning that game, I think, is a big confidence boost for this young Raiders team. But other than that, I don't see it as much down the road. Robert, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, see, Two Rivers, when I watched them again play Brilliant, and I watched them play Lutheran, I was just kind of saw exactly what I was expecting. Just like, yeah, they're probably going to win maybe one game, 2 games, just because they just had an issue scoring. But yeah, they scored 60. I mean, scoring 60 at New Holstein, you got the cheerleaders, you got the fans. I mean, a tough place to play in the doghouse. Like, I mean, you got to give them respect going on the road. Casey Hibbert had a good game, and Brady Richards. I mean, those are 2 capable players. Orion Gauger's having an all right season. They got some guys. Like, hopefully I'm just looking for them to compete against and play a good game against the bottom 4 teams. And I definitely think they can do that. I do think they have some easier games on their schedule. I know they have Mishkat coming up. I believe they play Hilbert. So I definitely think they can beat Hilbert. At Hilbert, yeah, that's going to be a win for them. Mishkat is 0-6. They got Algoma, Gibraltar. I think there's some games in there that they can kind of, come back and they can kind of maybe pick some victories off of those guys. But, yeah, I mean, obviously, you're not beating Roncalli, you're not beating Brilliant, you're not beating Valor's. Kiel, you're not beating either. So it's just a tough season. But, I mean, hey, Brett Linsmeyer got them their first win of the season, and hopefully they can use that as a stepping stone to kind of finish the year strong as a group and just prepare for next year.
Yeah, like you mentioned, some nice non-con games looking ahead, and hopefully they can keep using this as some momentum. And now let's look at the team they beat, sitting at 1-4 in conference as well, the New Holstein Huskies. And this team's a little surprising to me here, Robert. We see their leading scorer. This jumps off the page to me. Jayden Braun. I mean, you would have thought coming into the year, Henry Schnell would have been a lock for their leading scorer, but he's sitting second at 12.1. We got Phil Casper at 11.4. Then he's also averaging 9.9. And then Jayden Braun, 7.7 rebounds. And so I feel like that's a guy we didn't really even talk about much in the preseason. Now he's showing up and he's having some big numbers this year, Robert.
Yeah, Jayden Braun. I know he's a guy I mentioned last year for everyone to keep their eye on, because like I saw him do some good things in the couple games I watched last year. I mean, he's a good shooter. I don't think he shot the ball very well to start the year. I think he had some games where he kind of got, they got behind and he was just bombing away. So his maybe average is a little lower than maybe it is. But, I mean, Henry Schnell, he's not shooting any – he started shooting the year shooting a ton. I think his field goal percentage might have been a buck something for a while there. And in the last 2 games, he has 1 2-point attempt and 13 threes. He had 5 for 13 and then lost to Chilton. I mean, yeah, 30% three-point shooter. When you shoot a lot, it's not horrible, but field goal percentage right now is 23 overall. That's not good. I mean, but yeah, I'm not too surprised. I kind of expected him to be around 10 points a game. He's 5th in the conference right now. He's on the front page of the conference for leading scores, and I expect him to keep going at this rate. Phil Casper's a nice player in the middle for them. But, yeah, I do think they're better than Two Rivers. I think it's close between them and Falls. But, yeah, between them, Chilton, I think they'll be able to – it'll be a close game between them, the bottom 4. Obviously, with them, you really don't know what's going to happen with the bottom 4 teams. Yeah,
I agree. And the Huskies, sitting at 1-8 overall as well. I mean, they had some tough non-con games in there. I believe they went to Sheboygan South even. I mean, and that's a tough one. So now let's move on here. We'll go to the Chilton Tigers here, 2-3 in conference, 4-5 overall. And just looking at this Tigers team, head coach Corey Banke's team, just it's Max Mueller, Alex Breckheimer, and then Warren Wilcox, 3 leading scorers with Mueller 10.7, Breckheimer 9.6, and then Wilcox 7.3 points per game. And also Breckheimer's averaging 9.5 rebounds a game. I saw you had like 17 a few nights ago.
20.
Or 20 it was? Wow. Yeah. So
yeah, I checked. It was 20.
Yeah.
A school record.
Yeah. So shout out to Breckheimer on that. And yeah, they handled Falls 20 by 25. They beat them 70-45. So I think they're a step up above, I think, Falls and TR. And I think they compare more to New Holstein, which is kind of what we're getting, I think, in that bottom 4, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, New Holstein, they kind of always have the way of kind of just not sneaking up on teams, but like they'll have that 1 or 2 games a year. I know we just talked about them, but they'll kind of come in and win. But Chilton, I do think they're the top of that 4, just because they can shoot it pretty well. Against Brilliant, it was a 3-point game with about 9 minutes left in the half. Then Brilliant just went on a big run to kind of say that's that. But they were banking threes in. They had good energy. They were just hitting their shots. Alex Breckheimer had several threes in that game, along with Mueller and just a couple other guys hitting shots. But Alex Breckheimer, I said it in football, I just like him as an athlete. You kind of never know what you're going to get as in a good way. Like something's always going to happen with him. He's always going to make a play. He disrupts shots. I mean, 20 boards, that's a great accomplishment. And he's a really nice player for them, along with a few other guys. And so Chilton, I definitely – they're a respectable team, even though they lost Hallbach last year. He's kind of filling in that role. And, yeah, I mean, look for Chilton to just keep winning those bottom 4 games. And I think Chilton ends up in the middle there at number 5.
Yep, I think that's their spot for the rest of the year to come. And let's move to the other 2 and 3 team, the Valor's Vikings. So this one, I mean, they're losing the games, I guess, that they beat the bottom 4. And, I mean, they lost to Roncalli, Kiel, and Brilliant now, which, I mean, 2 of those 3 were close games. And as we know, the Roncalli one was really not. I guess this is kind of where we're going to probably spend more time, because these are going to be like, I like to call them the contenders and the pretenders. I think these 4 are like, let's say the contenders, even with Valor's under 500. I still want to throw them in there because they can still give these teams that are contending a pretty good fight. So Yeah, the Valor's Vikings 2-3 in conference, 2-5 overall. It says, has not been really. It's been okay for Valor so far this year. Of course, the Roncalli game was just a different animal. We saw them have COVID problems. We saw Mason Myers out, which was a big loss for the Vikings, and also Nathan Banky off the bench, which really hurt the team. So that it's hard, jet hanger, all that jazz. It was tough for the Vikings. But just looking at the points per game, the leaders, we have Cole Hovey sitting at 17 a game with 13 boards. Then Jackson Olsen averaging 10 and 8. And then Mason Myers is averaging 9 points and 3.2 assists. So, yeah, what have you seen from this Vikings team, Robert?
They're definitely a contender. I know you kind of didn't thought about maybe not putting it. Valor's definitely a contender. I have them, like, if I made a power ranking right now, they're my number 3 team. Look for Valor to go a little run here. I think they can pick up some ground. Maybe not in the conference. It's tough having 3 losses in the conference, when only playing 5 games. But, they play Wrightstown coming up. I think they can win. Wrightstown's still a really good squad this year, but I think Valor can beat them in that game. And then they got New Holstein and Laconia, 2 winnable games there. I think they go on a run, pick up some steam. I mean, yeah, that's a tough stretch of conference games. Kiel, Brilliant, and Roncalli. And, I watched that Kiel game. Kiel shot great. Valor's didn't. Kiel is not a better team than Valor's overall,
Agreed.
I think, right now. And I'm not going to say it's not close, but I think Valor's is a clear step ahead of Kiel. And maybe that's a little recency bias for Kiel's last game, but Cole Hovey, you know how much I like Cole Hovey. He's just like a solid dog. He's just a tough player. Like, dude, you can rely on, is just going to show up to every game, and you're never have to worry, what are we going to get from this game? Just a consistent player, and I really like him. And Mason Myers, the other dude, I think I made him like a mock top 10 a couple weeks ago, and I had him at 10 just because it was kind of not a clear 6 through 10. So I put him at 10, and I definitely think he's in that conversation. He picks up some steam if he comes back from COVID or illness, whatever issue he has. He can come back strong, and I think he's kind of the glue that holds them together. You obviously saw that in last game.
Yeah, I totally agree, Robert. I think I agree they're a step above Kiel. I was just mentioning with the records. They're not right now, but I think they're the better team. I think that second time around, I think that'll be a great game. But we'll talk more about the matchups between these contenders, how they have played against each other so far. But we'll keep continuing through the rankings here. We got Kiel now sitting at number 3, 4-1 in conference, 6-2 overall. And looking through this Raiders team, Pierce Arns leading the team in scoring with 17.4 a game and 4.8 assists as well. And then Grant Mons, that was a guy who you were high on at the start of the year, and rightfully so. 12 and 16 he's averaging right now, insane. And then Mitchell Endry's averaging a nice 11 for the team to add to them as well. And just it's been nice seeing Grant Mons play the way he's been playing so far, Robert. And that's really helped this Raider team so far because we knew Arns was going to have a big year, but like having Mons too, it's been big.
Yeah, and I'll start with. So I'll address like last night's game. Obviously Brilliant won by 30. I was kind of surprised Kiel didn't, because I didn't really think they could match up too well with Brilliant, just because, you got 6'8" and 6'6", 6'5" in the middle. And then you got some quick guards on the outside, but they sat in a man the entire game, and Jeremy Lorenz just had his way. Looked like the player that he's all hyped up to be. But then I kind of go over to the Kiel side, and I love the player. Love the dude. Great dude. I'd take him on my team. But Pierce Arns, if he shoots a lot. In his last 5 games here, 8 for 26, 9 for 25, 4 for 21, 8 for 20, and last night 4 for 17 from the field. Not good numbers. And he's shooting 21% from 3, 53 from the line. He's had a slow start to the year. And he just shoots too much, I think. And for this team, Grant Mons, you saw, he kind of had some stat fillers against some, Green Bay West, some weaker opponents, rebounds in the middle, but he's still a big body in the middle. think he had 10 last night. He had a 3. Mitchell Endries is one of my favorite guys, maybe through the conference, but I really like Mitchell Endries in this team. I just feel like if they almost played through Munns and Endries a little more and Arntz was more patient, I think they'd be better off. And, I mean, when Pierce is hitting his shots, it's different. I mean, he hit some big shots at Valor's, and that kind of gave him the win. He had a nice little sideline out of bounds play at the end of the game. Really good player. He's hard to keep in front of you, but I don't know. I just feel like if he could kind of cut back his field goal attempts, I don't think his points per game would go down a ton, because last night I would just see him. He'd come down the floor and we'd shoot just a fadeaway kind of over 2 guys, mid-range shot. It'd be no good, and it'd be a 5-second possession for him. I just think they're not the greatest when they just have those short possessions off of one shot. Still a great player. I mean, he's up there, but I mean, I think we're going to revisit the rankings after this. We can talk more about it later, but
we will.
That's what I see from this Kiel team right now. I just think they kind of need to regroup a little bit and say, okay, what's our identity? Because they came out hot start of the year, and now, I mean, after a loss like that last night at Kiel, yikes.
Yeah, I think sometimes, I mean, you mentioned like with the idea of like just shooting yourself out of the game. I feel like sometimes we see Arns kind of play hero ball, and I think that sometimes, can really cost this Raider team. I think they have the talent. They have all the talent in the world to be just as good or better than this Valor's team, but they just sometimes, I mean, we see really Arns just shoot out of the games, and that's how it is, but they're still sitting 4-1 right now. But yeah, I'm expecting a Valor's run as well with you, but let's move to one of the 5-0 teams left. We have in conference, we have the Roncalli Jets, and this team, they've been great this year. They're ranked in Division 4 as well, and head coach Joe Garceau has his team, sitting undefeated still, and they have Luke Pautz, and Luke Pautz has been putting up some insane numbers, 34, 13, and 4 right now, insane. And then Ryan Fisher averaging 8.7 points a game. And then also Joe Witzak, a guy we mentioned at the start of the year, 8.6 points with that. But yeah, it's been nice to see like Ryan Fisher step up in that 8.7 points per game role, averaging close to 9. Because we originally had Joe Witzak as kind of like that second guy, maybe like Tyler Bonin last year. But we've really seen Fisher step up and kind of like with Witzak, and they've kind of made a nice supporting cast, I'd say, around Pautz so far this year. And with that, I mean, I think that's kind of where they're sitting with their undefeated record in conference, and they're looking great right now. Robert, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to address this one time, and I got to watch what I say here. And I think it kind of can be used as a positive more than a negative, but let's just face it how it is. Before we get into all the players, it's just like Roncalli knows they know their identity. They know what they're about. I mean, Joe Garceau he's not pulling off the gas at all. And I think that kind of helps them. When you look at their wins, it's like, wow, we're not going to let off the gas, and we're not going to, okay, yeah, we'll only win by 20. We're beating you by 50, and we're making it hurt. And I think that kind of helps them just because they're used to every game. Just, okay, we're playing the full 36 minutes, pedal to the floor in scoring. So I think that's why, like, late in games, like in the second half, they're really good at home. And I think in the first half, they just come out firing because they're just always, let's go right away. But I think that also kind of brings in some games where, like, you look at last night, and I mean, obviously we already discussed Valor's wasn't the team that they are. Last night they lost guys. So, and I think last night that kind of shows. And then even like Two Rivers, okay, you won by 58 or whatever. That's good. I mean, Chilton, you won by 50, but I think that was Breckheimer's first game back, and he wasn't a factor at all. So I think scores, I don't think matter as much when they're in blowouts. So that I'm going to address it, but they've had a big start to the year. And Luke Pautz, I mean, love the dude. Like Luke Pautz is one of those guys you always hear, like, sports commentators or hosts. They always kind of talk about the dudes like Tom Brady or Jim Brown or Lawrence Taylor. Just, I'm going off football just because it's NFL's in season. Like, they're so good, and no one really can explain why. They're just a great player. There's not that one thing they do great. Every part of their game is good, and that's what I see in Luke Pautz. It's just like kind of, oh, well, Luke Pautz is good just because he works really hard. Yes. I mean, he works harder than anyone else in the conference. He can shoot the three. He buries you inside. He's the best rebounder in the conference, the best hustle player. He's so tough. I mean, just knowing from playing against him for 2 years and when he was a freshman and sophomore, like, this dude's just going to give you 100% every night. And I think his stats show it. And obviously, you know, when you're beating teams this big, your stats are going to be big. And I think Luke deserves that. Like, that shows how hard he's working in these games. And just, no, I'm not gonna take a night off. I don't care who we're playing. I'm gonna dominate you. And that's why I think Luke Pautz is such a tough player. And obviously you mentioned some other players. Reese Stengel, very solid player. He can shoot it outside. Just a good glue guy for them too. And Braden Yanda, he's a good guy too. And Ryan Fisher, I mean, he's not shooting a high percentage right now from three. I think he's a buck something, but he's a guy. I mean, he has a couple games where he's shot a good percentage, and he's a guy who can get hot, and he's just a good system Roncalli player. I mean, when Roncalli runs their Beloit offense, they run. I mean, they're just so. Joe Garceau runs it very well. He's kind of just taken it from previous coaches, and he's added his own little spice to it. And here's just a Roncalli team. Right now, I think they're just the favorite because they've beaten these teams so big. But I think if you look at their schedule, they haven't played a true test yet.
No, yeah, I'm in complete agreement. I kind of want to piggyback off kind of what you said with the whole. I mean, it's basically running up the score is kind of what we've seen.
Yes.
Like for example, last night, I mean, I was at the game against Valor's Roncalli. They're up. Yeah, congratulations, by the way. Luke Pautz hit 1,000 that night last night. So, yeah, big for him. Congrats. But, yeah, he went out. They're up 30-something, 9 minutes left. They take out the starters, and then they put up the back. They put the guys on the bench in, and then we see around like 5 minutes. So the starters come back out, and they're up 35, 36. Right,
they're coming back in. Yep.
Yeah, and you see Pautz, he's cherry-picking. Talk about playing – one of the toughest guys in the conference, but like they're trying to get the score up. And I mean, I've seen this before, but like it's been a while since I've seen something like this before. But like you mentioned, just Coach Garceau, you know, he wants to win, and he wants to win by a lot. It seems. I guess I wouldn't say it's throwing sportsmanship out the window, but it's certainly is not the most sportsman kind of thing I've seen in basketball. So, but yeah, they certainly have tougher tests ahead, but go ahead.
To add off that quick before we go to Brilliant, like he just plainly doesn't care, and like I said, I think that benefits him in a way. But like we said, you know, stats are overinflated, and I think it was brought up on a previous episode. Jordan made a mention stats don't lie. Here's a case. I'm not saying the stats lie, but I'm kind of saying the stats lie. Like, I mean, that's just the thing. Like, it's just like, yeah, I mean, Luke Pautz is going to put up the best statistical season that Roncalli's ever seen. And I mean, when you have Ben Stelzer, Chomby Lambert, you know, the list goes on and on and on of great players they've had over the last 20 years. You know, going back to Joe Rux and all the great coaches Roncalli's had. But it's just the point here. It's like, I don't think we can just base, you know, okay, I'm averaging 34. We should automatically It's tricky. That's what I'll say. And that's for now. I know we're going to get into it a little bit more at the end of the episode, but that's all I'll say.
Trust me. We're going to get into it. We'll do the full conference player of the year debate. It'll be a lot of fun. And plus with the rankings too, that's where it gets even more fun. But yeah, let's get to Brilliant now. The Brilliant Lions, 5-0 in conference as well, 9-0 overall. They've looked great so far this year. I mean, granted, there's been some games that have been a little iffy. I mean, that Valor's game was a little closer than some would like, but other than that,
comfort for Brilliant fans.
What?
Closer than comfort for comfort for Brilliant
for
fans. Sure.
But yeah, like you said, that 30-point comfortable win against Kiel looked great. And then yeah, Jeremy Lawrence is doing Jeremy Lawrence things. Although his stats aren't, which we'll get into later. I mean, 20, 13, and 4. he is a player that you got to watch. You got to really watch to see him play. I mean, 2013 and 4 is still incredible, but like I'm just comparing it to the Pautz 34 and 13. So I think, Lorenz is still just, I mean, even against Valor's, I mean, we saw him throw down a couple times. He had some great defensive plays. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about. He played, oh, wow. Some of his defensive plays too were just very, very, I don't know, things you don't see every day, let's say. So, but yeah, this brilliant team looked great. Parker Braun is averaging 11.4 with that. Guys like Caden Holly, I mean, who are in your top 10. He's not really on this right now. I mean, we see Grady Geiger, 9.8 points per game. So those are kind of the three guys for the scoring right now. And just Robert, Mr. Brilliant, how do you feel about your Lions so far?
I mean, yeah, I think this is the best start we've had for WSN. I know we had some good teams back in the 40s and 50s, but this isn't a history lesson we're breaking down this season. But yeah, I mean, we started out at Greenfield, or they started out at Greenfield, got down, I think, about 25-13, 23-10 in that game, and they just marched back, had their way in the second half. Then they picked up 4 easy wins in a row, and then Wrightstown, it was 28-28 at halftime, and they just came out, I think, on like a 20-0 run. Lorenz had another big dunk in that game. And so here's where I kind of draw the line. They picked up a win against Southern Door, but Valor's, we'll dive into that game a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like they held Lorenz. I mean, I think he had 18 in that game, but that was one of Lorenz's games where he didn't shoot great from the floor. I think he was 6 of 16. And obviously Lorenz makes him go, but we talk about the supporting cast, and I don't think it's like that much better over – I don't think they're that much ahead of Roncalli and Kiel. I mean, there's tons of guys. I mean, we didn't even bring up Brady Bodart from Valor's, a guy who I really liked this year as a shooter. Like, I think there's a ton of guys in this conference on Kiel, Valor's, and Roncalli that I don't think the supporting cast are that much of a difference. But yeah, Brilliant's just, they're kind of like okay, let's just take care of business. They're not a team who's just going to come out with big energy. They're not, like, if you watch their bench, they only have, I think right now, 4 guys on their bench or 5 guys healthy on their bench right now. They got a couple injuries. Lucas Mathis is a little banged up. When he comes back, he's another guy that'll be in the rotation and play some valuable minutes. But yeah, I mean, you talk about Lorenz, but Parker Braun, I was beating the drum on him a lot earlier in the year, and he's one of my favorite players in the whole conference right now. He was a big part of that Valor's win. He had 20 points, just had a big 3 at the end. Can get to the rim basically like whenever he wants, and he always picks his spots to do it. He's really good at okay, I'm going to stop. I'm not just going to go in there and chuck it up and hope for a foul, as we see a lot of just inexperienced guys do. Turns around, hits that mid-range, and Grady Geiger, I mean, he was a guy, I thought he'd be an asset in the preseason. I knew he would be their 5th starter. I didn't really know. He didn't play a lot of minutes last year, but he's been a great addition to this team. I mean, he's had, I think, a 3 in every game of the last 3 games, or 3 out of the 4. And so he can shoot a little bit, but he's really good, doing a good job complimenting Lorenz. When he gets that dish off, when Lorenz has got 6 hands on him, and he always kind of knows where to go. But I mean, yeah, obviously we pick up a 30-point win last night against Kiel, and that was probably the best game I've seen, like this kind of core group of juniors play together. And I mean, that was just kind of a statement win, like, okay, like, we're here, we can do this. And that's kind of what I see with Brilliant right now. And yeah.
Yep. And the big game, have it circled and marked on your calendars, Friday, January 7th at 7 p.m. at Brilliant. Roncalli comes to B-Town. So, I mean, that game right there, that's big stuff. I'm going to try to get to that game, obviously. I mean, that is something people are going to want to watch for sure. And I mean, that's kind of, so now we kind of broke down all the teams, how they've fared in the conference. Now we want to go back. We want to kind of revisit some of the bigger games. We want to kind of preview games that are going to happen between the contenders later. We're going to do some some good old player ranking talk, good old debates and stuff. Robert, where do you want to go from here?
How about we let's go into okay, we have our 4 teams. We're not going to go over the bottom 4 teams just because they're really hard to predict. I think we just let's throw out some matchups here. Like, okay, Roncalli brilliant, Valor's brilliant. Like the next time they see each other, I think Valor's Roncalli. Just like, where do these teams fare from here? So, I mean, whatever kind of matchup you're just wanting to know about or just kind of debate, let's just go in that direction.
Yeah, let's start with that game I just mentioned. Friday, January 7th. Roncalli comes to Brilliant. What are your first thoughts? I mean, I'm thinking, of course, right away, we're seeing the 2 player of the year candidates go at it. We see Pautz and Lorenz, and I think that in itself is going to be a great game. And I don't what are your thoughts? Let's hear your thoughts.
So originally when the schedules came out and kind of how this season's developed, I was kind of glad that, okay, Brilliant hosts them first, because Brilliant's a team. I think they're always playing their best ball at the end of the year. And not to say they're not playing their best ball now, but I do think they'll be better off at the end of the year. So I think obviously we know how hard it is to play at the Jet Hangar, but I think it's a little different if you play at home first. And this is kind of a random tool, but for some perspective, fired up Massey ratings here, and Roncalli's favored by 11 points in that game.
No,
and I think that's kind of accurate, but not really. I think it's a really close game. I mean, Brilliant. You look at them. I'm curious to see how they match up, like Roncalli, because we know, like, Luke Pautz. I've watched him a lot of times. I think it'd be smart if they put him on Lorenz and just be so physical with Lorenz, but he doesn't guard their best player normally. Like you saw last night, he came on Griepentrog. He was guarding Griepentrog and Bodart a lot. I think he was on Olsen a few possessions, but I mean, he normally doesn't guard their best player, which, like, last year he wasn't on Lorenz. I think maybe a couple of possessions here and there they get switched on to him, but so I'm curious to see who he matches up on, and then I'm curious to see, like, if he's not guarding Lorenz, who is then? Because I mean, Jeremy Lorenz, he's the best player in the conference. So I mean, you got it. It's a tough matchup there. Then you got the 2 guards who, okay, you can handle their pressure. I mean, Roncalli gives off so much pressure. We saw it like last night. When you don't have a great ball handler, it's going to be tough. So I mean, you got Holly and Braun. Hopefully they can just kind of one of them gets a mismatch and one of them can kind of run the show. And I'm interested to see kind of what Brilliant defense they play too, just because obviously you have to do something about Pautz. I mean, he's not averaging 34 because for nothing. So I'll be very interested to see what kind of defense Brilliant plays also.
Yeah, I think those are great points you bring up. I think it just depends. We got to see how Pautz is gonna. Because I mean, Pautz is playing a lot of minutes right now a game, so they'll certainly be ready. I mean, Roncalli, it feels like them running all these minutes, Coach Garceau having these guys. It's for games like this for sure, and just I think Luke Pautz. I don't know how it's gonna go as we don't know, but it's certainly going to be an intriguing matchup. I think it'll be a very close game, like back and forth the way. Not sure who wins. I think it's going to be one of those that I think it might be split. I don't know if one team is going to sweep it. I think these teams are that close which I just want to compliment Roncalli's supporting cast, because myself at least was at the start of the year was acting as like this Brilliant supporting cast was significantly better than this Roncalli supporting cast. And right now, I mean, they might be a little better, but it's pretty close. I mean, it's a lot more closer than at least I thought. And I think the general consensus agreed with me. Like at the start, I thought it was significant, but yeah, you're right. Hats off to this Roncalli supporting cast, because I think that certainly, is going to make this a really good game too.
And I don't think Roncalli has a Grady Geiger. I think that's kind of where it kind of ends there. Like, I don't think they have another tough guard, but I don't think that's a big issue. I mean, Roncalli's so physical in their defense, where Grady Geiger, he's still a sophomore yet. So I don't think that's a huge deal, but and I think one positive for Brillion is I don't think Roncalli's really seen a team just to push the pace on them. And I know Brillion's kind of running a more ball screen oriented offense, and they have several different kind of offenses they run, all just kind of depending on what the game looks like. So I think if they run their ball screen offense, which they ran more, I think that helps with the pressure a little bit. Like it's not so much okay. Like Valor's runs that dribble drive, and when you don't have Mason Myers, okay, well, it's really hard to run. And the dribble drive, Valor's offense is really hard to defend when you got guys who can get to the rim, and then you have shooters everywhere outside the floor, and then 6'6" and 6'5" rebounding. So it's kind of different. So I don't think Roncalli's really seen a team like Brilliant yet, where I think in the past teams were like, okay, let's slow down against Roncalli. Let's not let them, when they've had their big scoring teams of the past, let's not let them play their game. Try to slow down, get a good shot every time. I don't think that's the way to beat them. I think you just kind of have to freewheel it. We saw like Lutheran do that a little bit last year, I thought, even though it wasn't a high-scoring game. They kind of played zone. They kind of just, okay, we're coming. We're going to hit our shots. We're going to play our game. They did what they needed to do, and they didn't let Roncalli kind of dictate how they played. So I think that's a big key in teams playing Roncalli. You kind of have to just play more loose, just coming in, and I think mentally – teams lose to Roncalli before they even show up a lot of the times. So that's kind of something I think to look for, the pace of play in that Brilliant game.
For sure. And I think like you mentioned, I think that like if you just want to compare scores and say, well, Brilliant only beat Valor's by, it was like 6 or 8. It was close. And then you see Roncalli, what they did to Valor's being by 34. Like we mentioned with Mason Myers, Nathan Banky, those guys out. You mentioned even with the dribble drive. But like even with that, Valor's, they shot lights out against Brilliant. And I think, I don't know if you can expect that the next time around when they play Brilliant. And even I think that those Valor's Roncalli, Valor's Brilliant, those games right now, it doesn't mean much because just going back to that with Myers being out and even Banky, and that's so big. And that's why I think those games, it'll be a lot closer, Valor's Roncalli come around. Hopefully we can see the Brilliant Valor's game be as close as it was, but we'll touch on it now, but Valor's, they were making all of their shots. Everything was falling for Valor's that night.
Yeah. And to, rebound off your last point, you cannot compare scores. That's just the thing. We saw Kiel march into Valor's and just kind of make all these shots, and then last night, Brilliant blows them out by 30, and then Valor's, was neck and neck with Brilliant. I think it was like a 10-point game, and I was like, okay, Brilliant's gonna comfortably win this. Boom, boom, boom. Trey Schneider comes back. Guy we didn't mention. He's a good, I didn't fail to mention him, and that was my mistake. He's a good shooter. If he got hot in that game, and that was the thing. Valor's got out to like a 14-3, 14-4. It was something like that, 14-4 lead, I think. And I was like, okay, I knew they'd kind of cool off, but that was just the thing. So it's you cannot compare scores because it's just who's on what night. Who's playing who, you never really know. So it's just until the bullets are flying and you're actually playing the team, you can't say, oh, we're going to win on paper here because we beat you by X amount. It's all different until you actually show up and get on the court.
That's why, I'm for sure looking forward to some of these games. How do you think Kiel Roncalli, how do you think that's going to really fare?
I like Roncalli in that game comfortably both times. I think we had Kiel in overtime last year against Roncalli. So, and that was with Lepisto and Coleman and the other Muns, obviously. But I think Kiel, they might be able to keep it close. One of the games, I'm predicting this. I think one will kind of be a blowout where it's going to be like a 20-point game, and I think the other one 20-plus point game. I think the other one it'll be close, maybe like a 10-point game, where if Kiel's hitting their shots, but. Yeah, you saw last night. Kiel hit their first three threes last night. I think it was like 11 to. They scored 11 points on their first 4 possessions, and honestly, I think that didn't help them just because I think they just kind of came down the floor and just started bombing away, and they got really cold. I believe they ended up like 5 for 24 maybe, and Brilliant was more like 4 for 12. So they hit a bunch of threes early on, and I think that kind of hurt them. So it's kind of all weird too in that sense. But I do expect Roncalli to take care of business both times.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Roncalli's got both those games. And then one more I want to touch on was, I think a Valor's Kiel rematch. I think that'll be a lot of fun. And yes. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think that's really like the third place in conference right now kind of game.
Yeah, I do expect Valor's to win that one. Valor's is a better team than Kiel, and I confidently can say that. Like I just think, not because of last night. I definitely thought about that after Kiel even won. I watched the game Valor's and Kiel earlier in the year, and I was just like, Valor's didn't shoot the ball great. I want to say they were maybe 19 for 60 on field goals, something like that. 19 for 59, I believe it was. And then Kiel shot the ball above their average. So it's just like Kiel made a bunch of shots. Valor's kind of had an off night. And yeah, obviously Valor's a tough place to play. I mean, you would see teams like the Roncalli Chambi senior year and the Fletcher Dallas senior year for Valor's. Like those two teams were not even close in skill level. I believe that game went into overtime.
It did. Yeah, Reese Brown hit a like a half court almost to tie the game, send it to OT. That was big.
Yeah, so it's like Roncalli always kind of seems to have Valor's always kind of seems to have Roncalli's number at Valor's for some reason, and so that's kind of something to look forward to if on a Roncalli Valor's matchup when everyone's healthy. But I do expect Valor's to take care of business, and I'm not off Kiel. I mean, obviously, we just mentioned Kiel matchups. I'm not off Kiel. When they can get hot, they're a deadly team. We saw it last year, but I just think like on paper right now, or just kind of an overview, maybe some recency bias. I do think, yeah, they're in that 3 to 4 tier, and I think they're more that number 4 team that I kind of mentioned at the start of the season than they are the number 3 or maybe upsetting Roncalli or something like that.
Yeah, I'm looking through that Valor's Kiel score first time around. We saw Brady. This guy we both like. I mean, a 3-point shooter, 0 for 6, 0 for 5 from 3 that game. Which that's a big guy to have on your team right there. And and Mason Myers put up 14, Olsen put up 15, Hovey 16, and they lost that game. Like you were spot on, 19 for 59. Yeah, I think that's what you said. So good stuff. And then Kiel shot 26 for 66. So they had him there, and just looking through it, Kiel shot above their average, basically Valor shot below. And at the end of the day, I think second time around, I like Valor's over Kiel for sure. I still have them number 3 like you. I think that's fair to put them. But with that now, Robert, do you want to go into we can do the player rankings, which is basically like that goes off the conference player of the year. You ready to do that?
Yeah, let's just start. Yeah, let's get into it. I don't know if you want to start because I don't have a 10, 9, 8.
I don't either. We have it kind of. I'd say it's more of like a tier kind of thing right now because 6 through 10 is so interchangeable. Go ahead.
How about let's just go 3 through 12 right now, and we can discuss 3 through 12.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
If we want to do that way.
Yeah.
So obviously we're not going to go who's your 3, who's your 4, but just kind of we'll kind of break it off in tiers. I
agree. I think. Well, I'm thinking in the 12, 11, 10, 9. So that kind of top tier. I know we mentioned guys I'll start Mason Myers. I think Grady Geiger. Those 2 guys you can slide in there. Maybe I don't know if this is a stretch. Maybe Brady Boder at 12. That might be.
He's Brady Boder in the mix. Yeah.
Yeah, I like him. I like him. Maybe if we're gonna expand it to 12. We usually do the 10. I think he's number 12 or number 11, and then I'll throw Mason Myers in there number 10. I think guy like Grady Geiger's in there. Parker Braun's been, of course he could be maybe even higher, and then you want to throw in some guys too?
Yeah, I think when you look at if you look at the 10 to 12 and more so 8 to 12 maybe, or 8 to 15, I definitely think, like, if you're looking at, like, the 9, 8, I think Mitchell Endries is definitely that's the lowest I'd put him. Caden Holly, I think, is in that, like, 10 to 12 range. I think Caden Holly's a little bit ahead of Grady Geiger just because he's so valuable. Ball handlers are so valuable, and the pressure he puts on the opposing team's ball handler is really good. Jayden Braun, I think you have to put him in there. I mean,
Yeah.
he's only shooting 23% from three, which is kind of gross. But, I mean, still, obviously, we're going to let the averages average out. And I know Jayden Braun's a solid player. He's averaging 13 a game. I know the Huskies aren't great, but I think he's in that mix of the 10 to 12. And, other guys I'll throw out there, Alex Breckheimer, I definitely think he deserves some love. He started the season slow. I believe he had a football injury. I want to say like a knee or something. So I think he's in there. I think he's in there too. And then obviously, I think if we even push it back to like a 13 to 17, I think that's when you see Roncalli, and even a little higher with Stengel, Fisher, Witsack, just guys like that. And Yonda, I mean, I think all those guys are in that 10 to 20 mix. And maybe another guy, Phil Casper, too. I think he's in that 15 range in there. So I think that tier, it's so hard. So I can't really put a solid ranking. But, yeah, Jayden Braun right now is the 5th best. I think he deserves some love. So I think that's where you kind of get your 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I have a question. I know you had Henry Schnell in the top 10. Where do you have him now? Is he outside of your top 20?
No, I said okay. So he's probably not outside of the top 20.
I know maybe straight. Yeah. Where would you put him?
I mean, he's still averaging 12.1, and I know like if say you change Henry Schnell with let's just insert a guy here, just a random guy from Roncalli or a guy from, say you trade him and Bodart in places. I don't think it's like a huge difference if Henry Schnell hits some shots like Bodart. Like I think we talk about Henry Schnell better. I think Henry Schnell's still in that like 14 to 16 range in there just because I'm just looking at his field goal percentage, but I don't think that's the player he's capable of. I think he's capable of being a top 10 player, and I still think he very well could be at the end of the year. But, the Huskies, they just had a tough season so far, and he's kind of just shot himself outside of the top 10. One of my Connor Velker made kind of that reference. Like, yeah, he's just shooting a lot. He's not hitting his shots right now. So once the buckets start falling back in for him, he can prove he puts up maybe some 20-point games that he's capable of doing. I think he moves his way back to that, maybe flirting with that top 10 again.
Yeah. I agree. I think once shots falling, we're going to see his stock go back up. Another guy I want to mention here, Jackson Olsen. I believe you had a number 5 coming in the preseason, and he certainly has. I'd say has not expectation wise. He has been kind of below those expectations. I'd say. Where would you have Jackson Olsen at right now?
Jackson Olsen is a very tough player to rank. I know you kind of had maybe a comparison. I don't know if we talked previously about it, and I liked the kind of way you looked at it. I just think Jackson Olsen is maybe a little. I mean, he's averaging 10.4 a game, respectable when you have all of the scoring options on Valders. And Jackson Olsen, I think, is still in my top 10. I think he's in like that 8 to 9 range. I know I brought that up previously, but I still think he's a top 10 player. And think about Jackson Olsen, though. He's a good shooter. I mean, he's shooting above 30% right now. He's at 30, which I think will go up. He's proven he can be a great shooter through his first 3 years playing, or 2.5 years playing. I think to take his game to the next level, he's just got to get a little more physical inside. I think he rebounds well. He's a big body. I just think if he could get a little some more moves in the post and just get a little more post presence, I think you would see his game elevate, because he's got a great basketball body. He's long, and he's just kind of had a slower last couple games here, even though he's still kind of scoring. I think he had 3 in the last game against Roncalli. Not really sure what happened in that game. You were at it, so maybe you can explain after.
we saw him get benched actually to start the second half. He was not in the first 5-6 minutes second half. He was not. They brought him in maybe 12-13. Then he finally had that three. He was scoreless at halftime, I believe. So shots weren't falling. He wasn't really taking shots either. It's how I explained it. Almost the comparison I was talking to Robert with before was freshman year. I mean, I think we saw the same Jackson Olsen, if not a better Jackson Olsen in terms of just shot selection. It seemed like he was his freshman year just more comfortable shooting, like more confident, I'd say, shooting. It almost seems like just when I don't even know how to explain it. Just watching him play this year, it's just been different, and even last year too a little bit. But certainly he has the skills. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he's got that excellent 3-point shot. He is a great body in the post, as you mentioned, and just he has the potential. Like he's had this potential since his freshman year to make that next leap, but it just comes down to the physicality, and it's not there right now. It just isn't. And I agree, still top 10, but I think, yeah, I mean, closer to the 8, 9, 10 now than that where he was at 5, look 4-3. So just tough right now for Jackson Olsen right now. I think that, I don't know, is there any other, because I think 4, are you still going to say Arns?
No.
Oh, let's hear it.
No. I mentioned this before. So where were we? I think. So yeah, I would put Arns. I'm actually. This is so tough because Pierce Arns was one of my favorite players last year. I remember. I think I ranked him coming into the year like, oh, keep your eye on this guy. He's an incoming freshman. I know he's a great player, and I watched him play a little bit in actually middle school. Caught a couple of his games. And he really impressed me. He's just kind of he's a guy who can take over a game, and he was a really good shooter. But this season, I mean, he's shooting 21% from behind the arc. He's shooting 33 field goal, and we kind of just talked about it. It's just I don't know if he's the type of player to take 26 shots a game or 22 shots a game. And I mean, obviously, still I'd love to have him on my team. And he's just a great player, but I don't know when you're shooting that many shots. I just think like when they're not falling, it just kind of hurts your team a little bit. But I definitely think his numbers will go back up. I don't think I'm going to put him in my like top 5 right now. I think he just squeaks out that top 5. And if we're just going off of like what we saw in his first 8 games from him, and I mentioned like, we'll just pretend you could trade a player to a team. It's like a guy who I previously mentioned, like a Brady Boulder. I mean, I don't think he would be too much different. I don't think Brady Boulder can get to the rim as well as Pierce Arns, but I just think, honestly, the amount of shots he's taking is this too much. And I think if you would insert some guys and give him as many shots, I think they'd average 17.4. And still, I mean, because he's got 40 more shots than Jeremy Lorenz, and he's played 1 less game, and that's just insane to me.
Wow.
And I mean, he's just chucking, and that's kind of how Kiel rolls. We're just hitting our shots or we're not. But I think he's like 6. I think I'd put him at 5 or 6 right now. I'd put him at 5 or 6 in there. I think him and Mitchell Endries are closer than I think I had him originally. Pierce is still a better player, but I think I have him like at 5.5. We'll say that.
Yeah, that sounds fair to me too, Robert. And now looking, I mean, I think Cole Hovey is still clear number 3. I think he'll kind of maintain that the rest of the year, averaging 17 and 13. He looks great. I know last night wasn't really a great game for any one of Valor's, but it would have been Tuesday night. Yeah. For this recording, but yeah,
21 last night.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, he still played well, but just with how the game turned out, wasn't the best. But looking good for Cole Hovey still, and now looking top 2 guys. This is where it gets dicey. What?
You missed one to replace Arns.
Oh, you wanna touch on who you got then at number 4 then?
Yeah, we didn't. I mean, you touched over him. He was actually, I think, 8 in my previous, but maybe a little bias here, but I have Parker Braun. I moved him into my first team. He's not averaging, a 17 or 15, but I just like what I see from him. Like, if you just watch him play, he's always in control. Obviously you got Lorenz, you got Holly, you got Geiger, you got Banky, you got Olsen. So there's a ton of mouths to feed. So he's not going to average gaudy numbers, but I just think, yeah, I mean, he's on either the first or 1A team in the conference. So, I mean, usually you see players get more recognition on the better teams. And I think obviously you have to factor that in, but I think overall, I just think he's just been so solid and he can shoot any shot. That's kind of what I'm saying. And he knows his role really well. He doesn't force anything ever. And I think Parker Braun was kind of like last year we saw him. I expected a breakout season. I think he averaged like 6 a game in there. So not bad, but he kind of just get a little passive, I thought, at times, and kind of let other guys. He had Kriplin there, so hard to get your shots at times. But he's a guy. I mean, if you give him the tools, if he was like a best player on the team, I think he'd be a guy posting up big numbers. I have him in that number 5 range. I think he's like one spot ahead of Arntz right now, just the way kind of the first 8 games has fallen out. But definitely something to keep our eye on. We'll probably revisit it at the end of the year or a next episode we have. But right now, I think I put him in the top 5.
Yeah, this is going to be end of the year, Robert. We're going to be doing an all-conference team. We're going to do a prediction challenge. We're going to write down our all-conference teams, and we're going to compare them to the actual results. So that'll be a lot of fun, just letting you know ahead of time. So we'll see. I mean, yeah, if Brilliant ends up winning conference, I think you could certainly see you could really see that happen with Braun and
if they win.
Yeah, for sure.
And even if, let's say, Arntz did stay at 4, I had Jackson Olsen at 5. I think Parker Braun is still on that first team. I think he's 5. Caden Holly, I had him above. Those 2 players, I sat and looked at it for a long time and didn't know who to put ahead. Put Caden ahead just because he averaged a little more last year, and I knew Parker Braun had the capability to do what he's doing. But I just like what I see from him. He's my kind of player, and yeah, he's a guy I've been beating his drum his whole career. So, I mean, yeah, we can roll into whatever we have scheduled next. I'm not really sure what you have scheduled.
I'll tell you what we got scheduled right now, Robert. We have the best part. It's how we're gonna end the episode. It's the Lorenz versus Pautz. It's the best part. It's we're gonna talk. I mean, we obviously know which way you lean, and I just want Robert to give you the platform right now a little bit to just kind of like reiterate your case here of. Because I've heard all the feedback. I'm sure you've heard some feedback about Pautz being number 1 or Pautz not being number 1, Lorenz being number 1 in the conference on your poll or on your rankings. What do you say to the people who say Pautz is the clear number 1?
I think you can't compare. First off, so I'm kind of going to make a comparison. It's not a great comparison. You can't compare high school to the NBA in the slightest, just because it's ever changing. But the NBA is. But I'm just going to kind of use this as an MVP kind of thing, like the MVP award in the NBA. And not to say the MVP award in the NBA is a joke, but it's kind of whoever has the best season. And I think right now Luke Pautz is maybe having the best season. He is. You can't deny it. He's shooting a better percentage field goal than Lorenz. He's shooting a better percentage from 3. From the line, he's down 12% from Lorenz, but who really cares? He's averaging, I think, one more rebound a game. I think he turns the ball maybe a little less than Lorenz. So he does. I mean, if we're just looking at WSN here, Luke Pautz is your player of the year, which he beats Brilliant. He's the player of the year. That's what I'll just say that right now, and I'm sure you'll agree. Whoever wins the conference, I think is their player of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But here's kind of the point I'm going to make in this. Like I talked about the MVP kind of award right there. And before I kind of dive into this, love both of the players. Whoever gets it is well-deserved. And I think I remember somebody asking me before the season, I put it on the story, the questions, like I said, tie as of now. Cause I'm like, I just kind of want to see how this plays out. Luke Pautz is definitely no one was expecting this season, but like we're kind of I'll just compare like two games from Luke Pautz and Roncalli. So I'll take the game like from Two Rivers he had. So obviously a record-breaking game. He shoots 20 for 33 against Two Rivers. And that's a great percentage, 60% from the floor. If you can shoot it 33 times and make it 20, shoot every time down the floor. He had 3 threes in that game, but obviously that game was a 58-point deficit. He's in late in the game. You can't compare that to like a normal player. And this is just based off of like, you know, people arguing the stat thing. So then I'm going to go over to a game like Jeremy Lorenz had. So he played Wrightstown, I believe it was like earlier in the year. Oh, yeah, okay. So December 11th, he plays Wrightstown. So he has 10 points in the game. So he took 7 shots, 4 for 7 from the field, 17 rebounds, 8 assists. He had like 4 blocks, alters every shot in the lane. So it's like, okay, who had the better game there? Brilliant got a win against Wrightstown, Wrightstown's not Wrightstown of last year, but they only lost to Freedom by 6. They had a 30-point win against O'Connell Falls, and they've played some good basketball this year. So it's just like that's my whole point with the Jeremy Lorenz thing. He's like, I think I kind of was like chuckling a little bit when you said, yeah, he's only averaging 20, 13, this, and this. I was like, yeah, that's a normal player of the year's average. And the other point I kind of wanted to make, I think you can relate to this, and I'm maybe contradicting myself a little bit here from 2 years back about the Kyle Tuma thing. Kyle Tuma was the best player his senior year in the conference. Ryan Steffes won the player of the year. I believe Tuma was around like a 15 a game, 15.1.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you're right around the ballpark. Yep.
He averaged 15.1 that year. Ryan Steffes, I believe for most of the season, was at about a 23-24 per game. I believe New Holstein won the conference that year. Well-deserved. Ryan Steffes won the player of the year. Kyle Tuma was a better player, and you can see that now. He's dominating. He's on a top 3 D3 team. He's their best player. Probably will win player of the year in the WEAC. So it's a little different. Like you see the rankings. You see Jeremy Lorenz is a top 6 player in his class on Prep Hoops and WSN. Luke Pautz is around like the 47, 42 mark for his class. I know they're different classes, so they're hard to rank. But, I mean, Jeremy Lorenz is a D1 player. Luke Pautz is a D3 player. Hope he commits to Oshkosh soon. But I love both players. That's where I kind of stand in this debate. Like, it's insane the numbers that Luke Pautz is putting up. And I think, like, okay, he's having the best season. But here's another point I'm going to make about Luke Pautz and Jeremy Lorenz. This isn't saying one's better than the other. Luke Pautz fits that Beloit Roncalli system so well. They're not okay. I'll throw the hypothetical trade scenario. Brilliant sends Jeremy Lorenz for Luke Pautz. I don't think Roncalli accepts. Would you agree?
I would agree. Yep.
Brilliant gets sent to trade Luke for Lorenz. I don't think Brilliant accepts. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
Just because I think the two players work in their system very well, and more so Pautz in the run up the score system. Let's score 47 against TR system. I think he really flourishes in that system, but more so obviously their offense. But that's kind of where I'm at. And like, don't get my words twisted here. Luke Pautz, I'm fully expecting him to win Player of the Year, even if Brilliant wins the conference. Wouldn't be surprised. But I'm still saying, like, we kind of have to watch out what we really look at here in, like, who's our best player, because obviously Jeremy has 6 hands on him every time he touches the ball. I mean, I was watching the game last night. Keel had, like, 3 guys on him several times. He just, boop, right over the top of their head layup. Like, it's so tough, and, I mean, it is what it is. You can't compare these guys, but I just think Jeremy's – I mean, he alters so many shots. And I don't know if you want to add in anything. I'm sure you definitely do.
You bet.
Yeah. What words do you want to pick apart for what I said there?
Well, you know, Robert, surprisingly, there are a lot of points I agree with you on. I think, I really do. I think the trade center. What I was doing, I was thinking, let's trade. Let's put Jeremy Lorenz on Valors. I think I'd rather have Jeremy Lorenz on Valors than I'd rather have Luke Pautz on Valors. Call me crazy. I mean, anyone, but like, I was just thinking, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, the dribble drive system, if they had Jeremy Lorenz in the dribble drive system with Mason Myers
Yeah,
and shooters everywhere, I don't think Luke Pautz would play good in the dribble drive just because
I don't.
Luke Pautz, the most impressed part of his game, and there's so many parts that impress. It's not the hustling and just demolishing players for rebounds, because I've already established he's the best rebounder, the best hustle guy. That's where he gets most of his points, but is his mid-range. He's got that mid-range down. And I know he hit a couple last night, but like I think he would do well in that, but Lorenz has the mid-range down too. 14 of 18 last night from the field. Every time, like I said, every time he puts the ball on the floor, seems like there's 8 guys on the floor because there's guys just surrounding him. But that's just kind of where I'm at, and like I think you can do that with a lot of players, but these two especially. I just think that's kind of the thing I thought about. So I think it's really unfair to a player like Lorenz and Pautz to say, "Oh, you're better than the other one," or "You're not," because in their respected systems, I don't think they would trade anyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And well, I have one question for you, Robert. My thing is like, I mean, like you went back to New Holstein Valors with Tuma and Steffes, and I like that comparison. I really did. My thing is, how do you think the coaches, let's say, because I mean, we got the coaches, they're the ones voting on this player of the year stuff. So how much do you think they're going to value? I mean, because Steffes and Tuma, like their stats, I mean, they were close, whatever. But like, I mean, this is a wide margin right now with 20 and 34 being the points per game, like 14 points per game difference. How much do you think coaches are going to really value that? I mean, again, considering Pautz put up 47 against TR, I mean, how much are they going to value, what team they played against? That's my concern. How much these coaches are going to really look into these games.
So I know it varies from every single coach, but I think I can comfortably say the coaches do not care. Like I don't think they really care about the player of the year, as we're like fans. Okay, we open up that newspaper, who got this team, who got that team, who's player of the year. You know what I mean? I don't think the coaches care as much. And so I don't think it's a big deal to them. I really don't. Like I brought up before, obviously you're not trading your best player away, or you don't want anyone else in your system. And I think it comes down to it. I'm projecting Lorenz will finish the year at about 20, 21 points per game, 20, 19 in there, right around 20. I think Luke finishes right around 29, 30. I think there'll be a couple games where he, gets a mid-teens, or he gets a couple of games in there where, teams are just going to say, you're not beating us. You're not scoring 40 on us. You're not doing that. So I think there will be about a 8 to 10 point differential there. And I don't know, I can't speak for coaches on how they're going to vote, just because, I'm not going to bring in the whole feelings effect that you kind of brought up earlier about like sportsmanship. I don't think that has a huge deal to do with it. I just think it's more like, okay, I don't know who to pick. Brilliant won the conference. Roncalli won the conference. Boom, I'm voting for number 5, or I'm voting for number 33. I seriously think that's how it's going to go. And I do think seniority might have something to do with it, obviously. And we know Luke Pautz won it last year as a junior. There wasn't a better option. I think Lorenz, if I had to vote, I think he'd be second in the voting as a sophomore. I know you had Nikolai, you had Coleman, and those are guys. Lorenz was the second best player last year. But I definitely think it's whoever wins the conference, and I generally mean that.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it even in the preview. And at the end of the day, whoever wins the conference is going to get conference player of the year. But it's always fun to, compare the two players, because, I mean, 1 and 2, these guys, there's extremely, talented players, and that's really why we do these comparisons, because, like, they are that good where we have to do these comparisons. So just want to point that out there. But I mean, with that, Robert, you got anything else you want to add?
Not really too much. I mean, we covered basically all of it. I'm just excited for the I'm really excited, obviously, for Roncalli Brilliant, but just to see how this conference fares out, because even in those bottom 4 teams, I think there's, one of those teams might pick off a top 4 team just somehow. It's not someone's night, or, one of those teams is kind of a shocker. Falls goes on a run. It'll just be very interesting to see where the stats will kind of line up at the end of the year. And, I just think, I don't know. I don't really have anything else to say. I think we pretty much covered it all in this full breakdown through 8-9 games, but I don't know if there's anything else you want covered.
That's all I got, Robert. It was a lot of fun, and you guys know where to find Robert at EWC_sports on the Instagram. He's got a lot of good stuff up on there. Hopefully some more stuff soon. We'll see.
Hopefully.
Yep. But with that, I guess you guys know where to find me. Drew Skyberg, DREW, all platforms. But we have a Twitter now for the sports crew at JD Sports Pod. So make sure to give that a follow. Sleeper, if you guys want to join our squad, you get a free $25, no deposit needed. So DM us on any of our social media platforms if you're interested. Also Instagram, Jordon_sports crew. You can DM us on there too. So I'd be doing that if you have not. It expires December 27th. And then also scheduling. Tomorrow we got Zach, Jared, and Drew's Journey to a Million, episode 2. And then Monday we got episode 42 of Jordan Drew, the Sports Crew. So those will be coming your way. Also, Parker Sonovan, brilliant alumni, is coming on next Wednesday. So that'll be a great one, Robert. I know you're excited. So that will be a fun interview. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You might hear some stories.
I'm excited, and I'm going to be asking for some stories. It might be a long one, but it'll be a fun one. So, with that being said, thank you all for listening to yet another episode of Jordan and Drew, the Sports Crew, the perfect podcast for you.